Marie was unlike any other person I've ever met. I'm Marlis Haun Arnold, and I want to help you get to know her too. You see, before she was Aunt Marie and a member of our family, she was my dad's typing teacher, Miss Hood, at Whitewater High School. Now, I've seen Dad's report card, and I know he was not exactly her best student. So I'm sure once he graduated, he thought he'd seen the end of her. So imagine how surprised he was a few years later when his brother, my Uncle Paul, brought her home as his girlfriend, and then when they announced they were getting married, which they did in 1948. I would have loved to have seen his face. But before that, Aunt Marie was born Lena Marie Hood and grew up in a tiny town in Oklahoma called Carmen, which she was very proud of being from there. Like I said, she married my Uncle Paul in 1948, and they had one child, Larry Kent, born in 1950. Once she left teaching, she worked as a secretary to the Wichita police chief. And I don't know a lot about that other than one of her favorite stories was talking about how she got to ride in the police sidecar. And unfortunately, I don't have any photos of that one. I wish I did. But after that, she spent 26 years as secretary to the dean of the College of Health Professionals at WSU, where she retired at the young age of 78. My Uncle Paul, meanwhile, spent his career working at Boeing. Aunt Marie loved to refer to herself as PT, which I'll explain what that is in a minute. But I want to give you a peek into her personality. One of her favorite things was she loved the summer heat. She would love to go out on a blazing hot August afternoon and pull weeds in the backyard, or just lay on the driveway and soak up the sun. So you can imagine her neighbors going by and, there she is, 70, 80-year-old something, laying out there on the concrete driveway in the hot afternoon sun. She also had a very unusual taste in music for somebody who was born in 1922. She, you would expect big band or, some of the legendary Nat King Cole and some of those kind of singers. She had some of those kind of albums, but she also had Pink Floyd, Ozzy Osbourne, Rolling Stones, and Led Zeppelin. And she proudly wore her Jimi Hendrix t-shirt to work at WSU in her 70s. She was inquisitive and opinionated, and she was known to send letters to the Wichita Eagle correcting their articles. And the PT stood for professional troublemaker, which she loved to identify herself that way. She would sometimes sign her letters with PT at the end. She was always wanting to learn, asking questions, studying, and taking notes. And one thing, she always knew how to give great gifts. I remember when I was a kid, in grade school and middle school, I played the flute. And two things I can remember, two gifts that I remember getting from her. One was a silver flute necklace, which I know you just don't run out and buy that anywhere. She looked hard to find that for me. And then also she gave me a Jean-Pierre Rampal album, which if you're not familiar, he's a famous flautist. So, like I said, she put a lot of thought into it, and it wasn't, the typical, grandma or aunt kind of gifts. So she was very creative. And another thing, almost every conversation I would have with her, she would at some point say, "How can I help?" She always wanted to be supportive, of me and my businesses. Over the years, I've sold a line of jewelry, Mary Kay, and also our own brand of tea. And she was always supportive of all of those things. And just to give you an example, here's a letter that she wrote to me, just to give you an insight as to what her letter writing was like. This accompanied one of her Mary Kay orders. "Guess I'd better get some more Mary Kay beauty products because those things really work. Evidence? I had a new experience a few weeks ago. Got kissed by a man. This occurred in Dylan's grocery store because I complimented him on the good job he did cleaning up a charcoal spill. He seemed very pleased and said, 'I've been asking God for something like this.' Then I asked if he would like me to tell his supervisor, and he just put his arm around my shoulder and placed a quick little thank you on the side of my face." So I guess, from that, she assumed she needed more Mary Kay so she could recreate that situation, I guess. She also, later in life, things got really tough for her. She lost her son in a tragic fire. She lost my Uncle Paul to a long illness, and then lost her sister suddenly. So at that point, late in her life, she only had mom and dad, my husband Alan, and me to look after her. And so it was kind of ironic that that not so stellar student became her most trusted advisor in her later years. But she also sent a note to my parents at one point because they live in Newton, she lived in Wichita. They looked after her a lot more than I could from Kansas City. So she sent this note. Oh, and by the way, this was the cover of the card that she sent. The picture on the front is not a portrait of me. You can tell because this individual looks worried and forlorn. The reason she looks that way is that she's confused about important decisions to make, and the reason I don't look the same way is that I can rely on the very capable and effective firm named Haun and Haun, consultants with answers to everything. So she was very appreciative of help, but she also wanted to help other people. And, one of the things she was always asking was, what could she do to help me? What could she do to help my parents? And so even though we never talked about this gift that she's given, I knew I ultimately understood her intentions, partly because I was executor of her will, and so I had a chance to read through a lot of her papers and notes, and I know her mindset on things, and so I believe her intentions for this money was that she wanted it to help raise children with behaviors and attitudes that make them productive and well-balanced members of society. She also wanted to educate parents on how to raise well-balanced children using proper reinforcements while avoiding abuse, overprotection, or rewarding inappropriate behaviors. And so far each year, we've been able to award around $30,000 for the Kids Fund out of the money that Aunt Marie left. She had a pretty average life, as you can see. You probably, if you'd heard about this gift and this money that had been left to the foundation, you probably thought that she was a member of Wichita society and lived in a big fancy house. Well, I could tell you that's not true. This is the house that Uncle Paul and Aunt Marie lived in for more than 50 years. They drove older cars and they didn't go on lavish vacations. Yet she was able to leave an extraordinary legacy and a gift of $648,063.32. I wish so bad that she could have seen how many kids have been helped so far and to know how this money is being used and how many more children will be helped in the future. And to close, I'd like to leave you with one more quote from one of Aunt Marie's letters. Take care of yourself because the world needs more good people.